I woke up Tuesday morning to find my driveway completely blocked by three massive concrete barriers, the kind you see on highways during construction. Each one had to weigh at least 1,000 pounds, and they were positioned so perfectly across my driveway entrance that there was no way I could get my car out. I stood there in my pajamas, coffee mug in hand, staring at this absurd obstacle course that had appeared overnight like some kind of bizarre home invasion. My name is Marcus Montgomery, and I had been living in the Riverside Meadows community in Gilbert, Arizona for about 8 months. The neighborhood was nice enough, with palm trees lining the streets and Spanish-style homes that all looked vaguely similar. But the HOA, run by a woman named Barbara Patterson and her cronies, had been making my life increasingly difficult since the day I moved in. First, it was complaints about my mailbox being the wrong shade of beige. Then it was my lawn being a quarter-inch too tall. Last month, they sent me a violation notice because my garage door was open for more than 3 hours on a Saturday while I was organizing. But this was a whole new level of insane. I walked around the barriers, running my hand along the rough concrete. They were fresh, still smelling of that distinctive cement scent. Someone had gone through significant effort and expense to have these delivered and placed in the middle of the night. I pulled out my phone and started recording video, making sure to capture every angle of the blockade and the fact that my car was trapped in my own driveway. "So this is what I woke up to this morning," I said to the camera, my voice thick with disbelief. 3 concrete barriers blocking my driveway. No notice, no warning, nothing. I have to be at work in 45 minutes and I cannot get my car out. I walked back toward my front door, still filming, when I noticed a bright orange notice taped to my mailbox. I grabbed it and held it up to the camera before reading it aloud. Violation. Notice, unauthorized parking structure detected. Your driveway has been deemed non-compliant with community standards pending inspection. Access will be restored upon payment of fines totaling $1,200 and approval from the Architectural Review Committee. I looked directly at the camera. My driveway. The same driveway that was here when I bought this house. The same driveway that passed inspection when I closed on this property 8 months ago. I called my office and explained the situation to my boss, who thought I was joking at first. Then, I called a rideshare to get to work, spending the entire ride researching Arizona HOA laws on my phone. What I found was interesting. Very interesting. When I got to work, I couldn't concentrate. I was an IT manager at a medical software company, and normally I loved my job. But that day, all I could think about was those barriers. During my lunch break, I called a lawyer named Jennifer Morrison, who specialized in HOA disputes. Her receptionist squeezed me in for a 4:30 appointment. Jennifer's office was in a modern building in Tempe, all glass and chrome. She was probably in her early 40s, with sharp eyes that immediately told me she had dealt with this kind of situation before. "Tell me everything," she said, pulling out a legal pad. I showed her the video, the violation notice, and a stack of previous complaints the HOA had filed against me over the past months. She watched the video 3 times, her expression growing more severe with each viewing. "This is illegal on multiple levels," she said finally. "First, they cannot physically block your access to a public street. That's false imprisonment, which is a felony. Second, they cannot charge you for violations without following proper notice procedures, which according to your CC and RS requires written notice at least 30 days prior to any enforcement action. Third, and this is the big one, they cannot claim your driveway is non-compliant when it was grandfathered in before the current regulations." "So what do I do?" I asked. "You file a police report for false imprisonment and destruction of property rights. You also file an emergency injunction with the court to have those barriers removed immediately. And then, if you want to get really serious, you go after the board members personally for violating Arizona's HOA laws." She leaned back in her chair. "The thing is, Marcus, most people don't fight back because they think the HOA has unlimited power. They don't. They have to follow state law just like everyone else." "How much is this going to cost me?" "My retainer is $3,000, but here's the thing. When you win, and you will win, the HOA has to pay your legal fees. It's in the state statute, and based on what I am seeing here, you are not just going to win, you are going to destroy them." I wrote the check right there. I had been saving up for a new car, but this felt more important. This felt like war. Jennifer drafted the emergency injunction that afternoon, and we filed it with the Maricopa County Superior Court before 5. She also helped me file a police report, which turned out to be more complicated than I expected. The first officer I spoke to at the Gilbert Police Department seemed skeptical. "So let me get this straight," Officer Davis said, looking at his computer screen. "Your HOA put barriers in your driveway and you want to press charges?" "They physically blocked my ability to leave my property," I said firmly. "That's false imprisonment according to Arizona Revised Statute 13-1303. Officer Davis looked up at me with new interest. "You've done your homework." "I hired a lawyer. She's very good." He nodded slowly. "Okay. Let me get a supervisor involved in this, because if what you're saying is accurate, this is actually a serious criminal matter." Sergeant Wilson came over 15 minutes later. She was a tall woman with gray streaks in her dark hair and the kind of no-nonsense demeanor that came from years of dealing with people at their worst. I showed her the video and explained the situation again. "This is bizarre," she said. "I have never seen an HOA do something this blatant. Usually they stick to fines and liens." "Can I press charges?" I asked. "You can, and probably should. But I want to send an officer out to document the scene first. This needs to be done properly. Because if we're going to arrest board members, I want every detail nailed down." 2 hours later, I was back home with Officer Martinez, a younger cop who spent a solid 30 minutes photographing the barriers from every angle, measuring them, and documenting their position. He also interviewed my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who had seen the truck deliver them around 2 in the morning. "I thought it was strange," Mrs. Chen said, her English accented but clear. "Big truck, very loud, 3 men moving those things. I almost called police, but then I saw it was in front of your house and I thought maybe you were doing construction." "Did you see who was directing them?" Officer Martinez asked. "Yes, a woman. Blonde hair, very angry looking. She was pointing and telling them where to put each one." I pulled up the HOA website on my phone and showed Mrs. Chen the board photos. "Is this the woman?" "Yes, that one." She pointed at Barbara Patterson, the HOA president. "She was here, very bossy." Officer Martinez wrote everything down carefully. "This is good. This is very good documentation. Mr. Montgomery, I am going to recommend to the sergeant that we proceed with criminal charges. What the HOA did here crosses the line from civil dispute into criminal activity." That night, I barely slept. I kept going over everything in my mind, wondering if I was overreacting, wondering if this was worth the fight. But every time I looked out my window and saw those barriers, I got angry all over again. This was my home. I had worked hard to buy it, and I was not going to let some power-hungry HOA board treat me like their personal property. The next morning, Wednesday, I got a call from Jennifer. "The judge approved the emergency injunction," she said, and I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. "The HOA has 24 hours to remove those barriers, or they will be held in contempt of court. I'm having the order served on Barbara Patterson this afternoon. What happens if they don't comply? Then the board members can be arrested for contempt. The judge was not happy when she read your filing. She specifically noted in her order that blocking someone's driveway is a clear violation of their property rights and potentially a public safety hazard. What if you had a medical emergency?" I had not even thought about that angle, but she was right. What if I needed an ambulance? What if there was a fire? "There's more," Jennifer continued. "I did some digging into the HOA's finances. Did you know that Barbara Patterson approved the purchase of those barriers using HOA funds without a board vote? Is that illegal? According to your CC and RS, any expenditure over $500 requires a majority board vote. Those barriers cost about $3,000 to purchase and deliver. She acted unilaterally, which means she violated the HOA's own rules. That gives us even more ammunition." Around 2 in the afternoon, I got a text from my doorbell camera. Someone was at my door. I checked the feed and saw a process server handing papers to someone. I rewound the footage and realized it was Barbara Patterson herself, standing on my doorstep looking furious as she was served with the court order. My phone rang 30 seconds later. "Unknown number." I answered. "This is ridiculous." Barbara's voice was shrill, almost vibrating with rage. You cannot sue the HOA. We are following the rules. You blocked my driveway illegally, I said calmly. You didn't follow your own procedures, and you committed a crime in the process. The judge agreed with me. That driveway is not up to code. The concrete is cracked and it is an eyesore. Then you should have sent me a proper violation notice 30 days in advance, given me time to cure the issue, and followed the dispute resolution process outlined in the CC&RS. Instead, you had barriers delivered in the middle of the night and blocked my access to a public street. That's false imprisonment under Arizona law. There was silence on the other end. Then, you are going to regret this. Do you have any idea who you are dealing with? I know people. Important people. Are you threatening me, Barbara? Because I am recording this call, and witness intimidation is also a crime. She hung up. I immediately called Jennifer and told her about the conversation. She was thrilled. Send me that recording right now, she said. That was incredibly stupid of her. We can add that to the evidence file. The 24-hour deadline came and went. The barriers stayed exactly where they were. Thursday afternoon, I got another call from Jennifer. They're in contempt. I filed the motion this morning and the judge issued a bench warrant. The Gilbert police are going to arrest Barbara Patterson and any board members who were involved in the decision to place those barriers. Wait, arrest them? I thought they would just get fined or something. Contempt of court is serious, Marcus. The judge gave them a direct order, and they ignored it. Plus, remember, there's still the criminal complaint you filed for false imprisonment. The police have been investigating that separately. That evening, Sergeant Wilson called me directly. Mr. Montgomery, we have completed our investigation, and we are moving forward with criminal charges against the HOA board. Can you be available tomorrow around 10 a.m.? We would like you to be present when we make the arrests. You want me there? Well, it is your property and your complaint. Plus, I understand you have security cameras. We want to make sure everything is documented properly. I agreed immediately. This was really happening. Friday morning felt surreal. I took the day off work and set up my phone to live stream to a private cloud account, just in case. I'd already checked my doorbell camera, my home security cameras, and even set up an additional camera facing the driveway. Everything was recording. At 9:45, Sergeant Wilson arrived with 4 other officers. She knocked on my door professionally. Mr. Montgomery, thank you for being available. We have arrest warrants for Barbara Patterson, Donald Fletcher, and Brenda Carlisle. Those are 3 of the 5 board members. The other 2, according to meeting minutes we subpoenaed, voted against this action and are not being charged. What are they being charged with exactly? Barbara Patterson is being charged with false imprisonment, conspiracy to commit false imprisonment, and contempt of court. Donald Fletcher and Brenda Carlisle are being charged as accessories in conspiracy. We have evidence that all 3 were present when the barriers were placed and actively participated in blocking your driveway. My neighbor Mrs. Chen's testimony had been crucial. She had identified all 3 of them from the board photos. Where are they now? I asked. We are going to each of their homes to make the arrests. Barbara Patterson lives 4 streets over. We will start there. Can I watch? Sergeant Wilson hesitated, then nodded. You can stand on the sidewalk. This is still a public street, but stay back and let us do our job. I followed the police convoy in my rideshare, my phone recording everything. Barbara Patterson lived in one of the larger homes in the community with an elaborate desert landscaping setup and a 3-car garage. 2 police cruisers pulled up in front, lights flashing but no sirens. Sergeant Wilson and Officer Martinez walked up to the front door and knocked. I stood about 50 feet away on the sidewalk, my phone capturing everything. The door opened and Barbara appeared, wearing designer activewear that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. Her expression went from annoyed to shocked when she saw the uniforms. Barbara Patterson? Sergeant Wilson said formally. Yes? What's this about? Madam, you are under arrest for false imprisonment, conspiracy, and contempt of court. Please turn around and place your hands behind your back. What? This is absurd. I'm not going anywhere with you. Madam, you can comply voluntarily or we can use force. Your choice. Barbara looked past the officers and saw me standing there with my phone. Her face went bright red. This is your fault, she screamed at me. You are destroying this community, all because of some stupid barriers. "Madam, turn around now," Sergeant Wilson said, her voice harder. Barbara finally complied, though she kept yelling the entire time they were putting the handcuffs on. "I want my lawyer. This is police brutality. I know the mayor. You are all going to lose your jobs." Officer Martinez read her Miranda rights, while Sergeant Wilson led her to the police car. I got it all on video, every second of it. Barbara's neighbors had come out of their houses, watching in stunned silence as their HOA president was arrested and put in the back of a police cruiser. The next stop was Donald Fletcher's house. He was more cooperative, but he kept insisting he had done nothing wrong. "We were enforcing HOA regulations," he said as Officer Martinez handcuffed him. "That is our job as board members." "You cannot enforce regulations by physically blocking someone's access to public streets," Sergeant Wilson explained patiently. "That is a crime, regardless of your position in the HOA. Donald went quiet after that, looking defeated as they led him to the second police car. Brenda Carlisle tried to run. When she saw the police at her door, she actually bolted out the back of her house, through her yard, and tried to hop the wall into the next property. She made it about 10 feet before Officer Martinez, who was apparently very fast, caught up with her and tackled her in her own backyard. She was screaming about persecution and constitutional rights the whole way to the police car. I recorded all 3 arrests, making sure I had clear footage of each board member being read their rights and taken into custody. By the time we got back to my street, a crowd had gathered. Word had spread fast through the neighborhood. "Is it true?" my neighbor Tom Brennan asked me. "Did they really get arrested?" "Yes," I said. "They blocked my driveway illegally, refused a court order to remove the barriers, and now they are facing criminal charges." "Good," said another neighbor, a woman named Patricia who lived 2 doors down. "Barbara has been a nightmare for years. Last year she fined me $800 because my rose bushes were supposedly the wrong color." "The wrong color?" I repeated. "She said they were too bright and not in keeping with the desert aesthetic. They were roses, pink roses. How are pink roses not in keeping with anything?" Other neighbors started chiming in with their own horror stories. Barbara had apparently terrorized the community for 3 years, handing out violations for increasingly petty issues. One family got fined because their kid's bicycle was visible in their driveway. Another got cited because they put out Halloween decorations 2 days before the HOA approved decoration period. While everyone was talking, a commercial towing truck arrived, apparently sent by the court. The driver had the court order, and within an hour, all 3 barriers were loaded onto a flatbed and hauled away. My driveway was finally clear. I felt an overwhelming sense of relief wash over me. I could leave my own property again, such a simple thing that I had always taken for granted. Jennifer called me that afternoon with an update. All 3 have been booked and arraigned. Barbara's bail was set at $20,000, the other 2 at $10,000 each. The judge was not sympathetic. She specifically mentioned in the hearing that HOA board members are not above the law and cannot use their positions to harass homeowners. What happens now? Now we wait for the criminal trial. But in the meantime, I am filing a civil lawsuit against the HOA for damages. You missed work. You had to pay for ride shares. You suffered emotional distress and your property rights were violated. I am asking for $50,000 in damages plus all legal fees. Will we win? Marcus, we already won. They committed multiple crimes on camera. The question now is how much we win by. Over the weekend, I got a call from Roger Mills and Sandra Patterson, the 2 board members who had voted against the barrier plan. Yes, Sandra Patterson was related to Barbara, her sister-in-law, which made the call even more interesting. "Mr. Montgomery, this is Roger Mills from the HOA board. I wanted to reach out personally to apologize for what happened to you. Sandra and I both voted against the barrier plan. We told Barbara it was illegal and inappropriate, but she insisted on moving forward anyway." "I appreciate you calling," I said cautiously. "We wanted you to know that the board is holding an emergency meeting to remove Barbara, Donald, and Brenda from their positions, effective immediately. We cannot have the HOA represented by people facing criminal charges. Sandra and I will be appointing 3 new temporary board members until the next election." "That sounds like a good idea." "We are also going to refund every questionable fine Barbara has issued over the past 3 years. Our lawyer reviewed her enforcement actions and found that nearly 70% of them did not follow proper procedure. We will be sending out letters to affected homeowners next week. This was bigger than I had thought. Barbara had not just targeted me. She had been running a scheme across the entire community. Additionally, Roger continued, we would like to formally drop all violations filed against you and offer our sincere apologies. What happened was unacceptable and does not represent the values of this community. After I hung up, I sat on my couch feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and exhaustion. I had not wanted any of this. I just wanted to live in peace in my own home. But I'd been forced to fight back, and now everything was changing. The following week was a blur of activity. Jennifer kept me updated on the legal proceedings. Barbara, Donald, and Brenda had all hired lawyers, expensive ones, which was interesting because where were they getting that kind of money? Jennifer had a theory about that too. I think they have been embezzling from the HOA, she told me during one of our meetings. I'm reviewing the financial records that were subpoenaed, and there are some very questionable transactions. Large payments to a consulting firm that does not seem to exist. Reimbursements for community improvements that nobody can account for. I'm talking about potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars over the past 3 years. Should we report that? I already did. I sent everything to the Arizona Attorney General's office. They have a division that handles HOA fraud specifically because it is such a common problem. The criminal trial was scheduled for 6 weeks out, but the civil case moved faster. Jennifer filed for summary judgment, arguing that the facts were so clear that no trial was necessary. The judge agreed. 3 weeks after the barriers had been removed, I sat in Maricopa County Superior Court as Judge Reynolds read her decision. This court finds that the defendants, acting as the board of the Riverside Meadows HOA, violated Arizona state law, violated their own governing documents, and violated the plaintiff's constitutional rights. The placement of barriers blocking the plaintiff's driveway was illegal, dangerous, and a clear act of false imprisonment. The subsequent refusal to comply with this court's order compounds the severity of their actions. She looked directly at Barbara, Donald, and Brenda, who were sitting with their lawyers on the other side of the courtroom. HOA boards are granted certain powers to maintain community standards, but those powers are not unlimited. You cannot harass homeowners. You cannot act as vigilantes. You cannot use your positions to settle personal vendettas. The evidence shows that Ms. Patterson specifically targeted Mr. Montgomery because he filed a complaint about her aggressive enforcement tactics. That is retaliation, and it is illegal. Judge Reynolds awarded me $45,000 in damages, plus all legal fees, which totaled another $18,000. The HOA's insurance would cover some of it, but the 3 board members were personally liable for the rest because they had acted outside their official capacity when they committed crimes. But that was not even the biggest news that day. After the civil hearing ended, Jennifer pulled me aside in the hallway. The Attorney General's office just called me. They are opening a criminal investigation into HOA fraud. They found evidence that Barbara has been embezzling money for 3 years. We are talking about at least $200,000. How did she think she would get away with that? Honestly, most people don't audit their HOA financials. They just pay their dues and assume the board is handling things properly. Barbara was counting on that apathy. She created fake invoices, fake companies, even fake meeting minutes to justify the expenditures. It was actually pretty sophisticated. The criminal trial for the false imprisonment charges happened 2 months later in July. Arizona's summers are brutal, and the courthouse air conditioning was struggling. I sat in the gallery with my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who had been subpoenaed as a witness. The prosecution laid out their case methodically. They had my testimony, Mrs. Chen's testimony, the video evidence, the police reports, and even testimony from the delivery company that had placed the barriers. The driver admitted that Barbara had paid him an extra $500 in cash to do the delivery at 2 in the morning, specifically, so I would not know until it was too late to stop them. Barbara's lawyer tried to argue that she was acting in her official capacity as HOA president and therefore had qualified immunity. The prosecution destroyed that argument quickly. Qualified immunity does not apply to criminal acts, the prosecutor said firmly. If a police officer commits a crime while on duty, they do not get immunity. If a government official commits fraud, they do not get immunity. And if an HOA board president commits false imprisonment, they definitely do not get immunity. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. They found Barbara Patterson guilty on all counts. Donald Fletcher and Brenda Carlisle were found guilty of conspiracy and accessory charges. Sentencing happened 2 weeks later. Judge Chen, a different judge from the civil case, was clearly not impressed with Barbara's continued defiance. Even at sentencing, she was insisting she had done nothing wrong. "Ms. Patterson, you have shown no remorse for your actions," Judge Chen said. "You abused your position of trust in your community. You harassed a homeowner to the point of committing crimes against him. And even now, you refuse to accept responsibility. This court sentences you to 18 months in county jail, followed by 3 years probation. You are also permanently banned from serving on any HOA board in the state of Arizona." Donald Fletcher got 6 months. Brenda Carlisle got 8 months because she had tried to flee from police. But the story was not over yet. The Attorney General's fraud case went to trial in September. I did not have to testify in that one, but I followed the news coverage closely. It turned out Barbara had embezzled even more than they initially thought. The final total was over $300,000 over 4 years. The fraud trial was quicker because the evidence was overwhelming. Bank records, fake invoices, everything. Barbara was convicted of 23 counts of fraud, embezzlement, and theft. Judge Martinez sentenced her to an additional 5 years in state prison to run consecutively with her false imprisonment sentence. By October, life in Riverside Meadows had settled into a new normal. Roger Mills and Sandra Patterson had reorganized the HOA board completely, bringing in new members who actually cared about the community rather than power. They hired a professional management company to handle the financials, ensuring that what happened with Barbara could never happen again. The HOA refunded over $100,000 in bogus fines to homeowners. They also revised the CC and RS to include stronger protections against board overreach and clearer procedures for dispute resolution. As for me, I finally got around to fixing those cracks in my driveway, not because the HOA demanded it, but because I wanted to. I hired a good contractor and had the whole thing resurfaced. It looked great. One evening in late October, I was sitting on my front porch, enjoying the cooler weather that finally arrives in Arizona in the fall. Tom Brennan walked over with a 6-pack of beer. "Thought you might want one of these," he said, offering me a bottle. "Thanks," I said, taking it. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and purple. "You know," Tom said eventually, "a lot of us were scared of Barbara. She had been running this place like her personal kingdom for so long that it seemed like nobody could stop her. You standing up to her going through all that legal stuff, it changed things around here. People are not afraid anymore." "I was afraid too," I admitted. "I almost didn't fight it. $3,000 for a lawyer, missing work, all the stress. Part of me wanted to just pay the fine and move on." "But you didn't?" "No, because it was not really about the driveway or the barriers or even the money. It was about the principle. This is my home. I worked hard to buy it, and nobody, not even an HOA board president, has the right to take that away from me or make me feel unwelcome in my own house." Tom nodded thoughtfully. "Well, I am glad you fought. We all are." Over the following months, I watched the community transform. The new board actually listened to homeowners. They held open meetings where people could voice concerns without fear of retaliation. They focused on real issues like street maintenance and community safety rather than harassing people about mailbox colors. The legal saga had one final chapter in December. The HOA's insurance company settled with me for an additional $20,000 to avoid a bad faith lawsuit because they had initially refused to cover the legal fees, even though the policy clearly required it. Jennifer negotiated that deal brilliantly. In total, between the court judgment, the settlement, and the refund of all those bogus fines I had paid over the months, I came out about $70,000 ahead. I used part of it to take a real vacation, my first in 2 years. I went to Colorado for a week of skiing, just me in the mountains and no HOA drama. When I got back after Christmas, There was a card in my mailbox from the new HOA board. Inside was a simple message. Thank you for standing up for what is right. Happy New Year. I also received several messages from other homeowners in different communities around Gilbert and even other parts of Arizona. News of the case had spread through local media and HOA watchdog groups. People were calling me, asking for advice on how to fight their own overbearing boards. I was not a lawyer and I could not represent them, but I could share what I had learned. I told them to document everything, keep records of all communications, and do not be afraid to hire a lawyer who specializes in HOA disputes. I told them that HOA boards have limits, that they have to follow state law, and that homeowners have rights that cannot be taken away just because they signed a CC and R agreement. A few people even asked if I wanted to start some kind of advocacy organization. I thought about it seriously. There was clearly a need. But in the end, I decided I just wanted to live my life. I had fought my battle and won. Others would have to fight their own. By February of the new year, Barbara Patterson, Donald Fletcher, and Brenda Carlisle were all serving their sentences. Barbara was in state prison and by all accounts having a terrible time adjusting to life without her authority and designer activewear. Donald was in county jail, apparently a model prisoner who spent most of his time in the library. Brenda had already been released after serving her full sentence with no early release because of her disciplinary issues. I never spoke to any of them again after the trials. I had no interest in their apologies or excuses. They had made their choices, committed crimes, and now they were facing the consequences. That was justice, simple and clean. My life in Riverside Meadows continued peacefully. I got a promotion at work in March, which came with a nice raise. I started dating someone I met through a friend, a woman named Rebecca, who thought the whole HOA story was hilarious and also slightly terrifying. We took things slow, but it felt good to have someone in my life who understood why I had fought so hard. The scars from the whole experience faded gradually. For months after the barriers were removed, I would feel a spike of anxiety every time I pulled into my driveway, half expecting to see some new obstacle. But eventually that faded too. The driveway was just a driveway again, not a battleground. I stayed active in the HOA, attending meetings and voting on issues. The new board was responsive and reasonable. When they needed to enforce actual violations, like someone who had not mowed their lawn in 3 months and had weeds 4 feet tall, they followed proper procedures. Written notice, time to cure, escalating fines only if the problem persisted. It was how an HOA was supposed to work. In April, I got a call from Jennifer. We had stayed in touch even after the legal cases wrapped up. I thought you would want to know, she said. The Arizona legislature just passed a new law strengthening protections for homeowners against HOA abuse. They are calling it the Homeowner Bill of Rights. It includes provisions specifically prohibiting physical blocking of property access and requiring HOA boards to carry liability insurance that covers criminal acts by board members. Did our case influence that? I asked. Your case was literally cited in the legislative hearings, multiple times. You helped change the law for the entire state, Marcus. That hit me harder than I expected. I had just been trying to protect my own property, my own rights. But apparently my fight had rippled outward, affecting thousands of other homeowners across Arizona who would now have stronger protections. That's incredible, I said, my voice a bit unsteady. You should be proud. A lot of people would have just given up and paid the fine. You fought back, and it mattered. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, processing everything. The whole experience had been exhausting and stressful and expensive and frustrating, but it had also been necessary. Barbara and her cronies had been operating like petty tyrants for years, and nobody had stopped them until they finally pushed too far and targeted someone who was willing to push back. I thought about all the other homeowners in Riverside Meadows who had paid bogus fines, who had been harassed over trivial issues, who had lived in fear of their own HOA board. They were free now. The money had been refunded, the tyrannical board was gone, and new protections were in place to prevent it from happening again. That evening, I grilled some chicken on my back patio and invited a few neighbors over. Tom Brennan came, along with Mrs. Chen and Patricia and a few others. We ate and talked and laughed, and nobody mentioned HOA drama even once. We talked about normal things like sports and weather and weekend plans. At one point, Tom raised his beer bottle in a toast. "To good neighbors and better boards," he said. We all drank to that. As the sun set and my neighbors eventually headed home, I stood in my driveway, the same driveway that had been blocked with concrete barriers nearly a year ago. The concrete was smooth now, freshly sealed, no cracks. My car was parked in the garage. Everything was normal. Everything was as it should be. I pulled out my phone and looked at the video I had recorded that first morning, standing in my pajamas, staring at those massive barriers in disbelief. I looked exhausted and frustrated and angry in that video. I had not known then what the next year would bring, the fights and trials and stress and eventual victory. But I would do it all again, without hesitation. Because some principles are worth fighting for. The right to live peacefully in your own home, the right to be free from harassment and abuse, the right to challenge authority when authority oversteps its bounds. These are not small things. These are fundamental rights that define what it means to live in a free society. Barbara Patterson and her board had forgotten that. They had started believing their own hype, thinking that their positions gave them unlimited power over the people they were supposed to serve. They learned the hard way that nobody is above the law, not even an HOA board president. I deleted the old video. I did not need it anymore. The legal cases were over, the criminals were in prison, the community was healing. It was time to move forward, not backward. Inside my house, I made myself a cup of coffee and sat down at my computer. I had been thinking about Tom's comment from months ago about how many people had been afraid of Barbara and how my fight had changed things. Maybe there was something I could do to help others who were facing similar situations. I started writing. Not a book or anything formal, just a detailed account of what had happened, what I had learned, and what resources had been most helpful. I included information about Arizona HOA laws, how to find a good lawyer, what documentation to keep, and how to file complaints with various government agencies. When I finished, it was about 15 pages long. I sent it to Jennifer for review, and she made a few corrections and additions. Then, I posted it on a website for homeowners dealing with HOA issues. Within a week, it had been downloaded over 2,000 times. People were sharing it, referencing it, using it as a template for their own fights. I started getting emails from homeowners across the country. Some were in Arizona, but others were in California, Texas, Florida, places where HOA abuse was rampant. They thanked me for sharing my story and my resources. Some of them sent me updates on their own cases, telling me about victories large and small. One woman in Phoenix wrote to tell me that she had used my guide to fight a fine for having the wrong color flowers in her front yard. She won and got a refund. A man in Tucson used it to challenge a rule that prohibited him from parking his work van in his own driveway. The rule was overturned. These were small victories compared to my case, but they mattered to those people. They mattered a lot. By summer, life had fully returned to normal. I got serious with Rebecca, and we started talking about moving in together, maybe buying a house in a community with no HOA at all. The idea of living somewhere without any board or rules or potential for petty tyranny was incredibly appealing. But I also felt a strange attachment to Riverside Meadows. This was where I had fought my battle. This was where I had stood up for myself and won. The community was better now because of that fight, and I was proud of what had been accomplished. In August, the new HOA board held a community barbecue at the neighborhood park. It was the first major community event in years, something Barbara had always refused to organize because she said it was too expensive and would create liability issues. The new board saw it differently. They wanted to bring people together, build actual community rather than just enforcing rules. I went to the barbecue with Rebecca. It was a beautiful evening, warm but not oppressive, with a light breeze that made the palm trees whisper. There must have been 100 people there, maybe more. Kids were running around playing, adults were talking and laughing, and the smell of grilling burgers and hot dogs filled the air. Roger Mills, who was now the HOA president, got up on a small platform and made a speech. "I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight," he said, his voice amplified by a portable speaker. This past year has been difficult for our community. We went through a lot of turmoil, a lot of change, but we came out stronger on the other side. We have a new board that is committed to serving homeowners, not ruling over them. We have new procedures that protect everyone's rights, and we have a renewed sense of community. He paused, looking around at the crowd. I want to specifically acknowledge Marcus Montgomery, he continued, and suddenly everyone was looking at me. Marcus stood up when many of us were too afraid to speak out. He fought for his rights, and in doing so, he fought for all of us. This community owes him a debt of gratitude. People started applauding. I felt my face get hot, embarrassed by the attention, but also grateful for the recognition. Rebecca squeezed my hand and smiled at me. "Speech!" someone called out, and others took up the chant. I reluctantly walked up to the platform. Public speaking was not my favorite thing, but I felt like I owed these people something. "Thank you," I said, my voice sounding strange through the speaker. I did not set out to be any kind of hero or activist. I just wanted to get my car out of my driveway and go to work. But sometimes you have to stand up for what is right, even when it is hard, even when it is scary. What happened here with the old board, that was not normal. That was not okay. And I am glad that we were able to fix it together. I looked around at all the faces, my neighbors, my community. The important thing now is to make sure it never happens again. Stay involved, go to the board meetings, ask questions, hold your elected representatives accountable, whether it is your HOA board or your city council or your state legislature. Democracy only works when people participate, so participate, speak up. Do not ever let anyone make you feel powerless in your own community. More applause, louder this time. I stepped down from the platform, and several people came up to shake my hand or pat me on the back. Mrs. Chen gave me a hug. "You are good man," she said simply. "Good neighbor." The rest of the evening was relaxed and fun. Rebecca and I ate too much, played cornhole with some neighbors, and stayed until the sun went down and the string lights came on, casting a warm glow over everything. Driving home that night, I felt a sense of peace that had been missing for a long time. The fight was over. The bad guys were in prison. The community was healthy again. And I could finally just live my life without constantly looking over my shoulder or waiting for the next violation notice. "That was nice," Rebecca said, squeezing my hand. "Your neighbors really appreciate what you did." "I just did what anyone should do when they are being treated unfairly," I said. "But most people do not. Most people just accept it and move on. You fought back." She was right, and I was glad I had. In September, I got a letter from the Arizona Department of Real Estate, which oversees HOA regulations in the state. They informed me that I had been selected to serve on a new advisory committee for HOA reform. The committee would review existing laws and propose new regulations to prevent abuse and protect homeowners. I accepted immediately. It would mean attending meetings in Phoenix once a month and reviewing a lot of policy documents, but it felt important. I had lived through HOA abuse firsthand. I knew what needed to be fixed. The first committee meeting was in October, held in a conference room in a government building in downtown Phoenix. There were about 15 people on the committee, including lawyers, homeowners who had fought their own HOA battles, a few legislators, and even one former HOA board president who was appalled by the abuses she had witnessed in other communities. We spent 3 hours discussing various proposals: stronger disclosure requirements for HOA financials, mandatory training for board members, independent audits for any HOA with more than 50 homes, criminal penalties for board members who embezzle or engage in harassment. It was good work, important work. At the end of the meeting, the committee chair, a state senator named Maria Rodriguez, pulled me aside. "Your case really opened people's eyes," she said. "We had been hearing complaints about HOA abuse for years, but until your situation got media attention, nobody was taking it seriously. You helped change that." "I'm just glad something good came out of it," I said. "Oh, a lot of good came out of it. That new law we passed, the Homeowner Bill of Rights, that is already making a difference. We have gotten reports from across the state about HOA boards backing down from questionable enforcement actions because they know homeowners have stronger protections now. Your case created a deterrent effect." Over the next several months, I stayed busy with the advisory committee work, my job, and my relationship with Rebecca. We decided to stay in Riverside Meadows for at least another year. The community was good now, and we had put down roots. In December, I got word that Barbara Patterson had been denied parole. She would serve her full sentence, another 4 years. I felt nothing when I heard the news, no satisfaction or anger or anything. She was just someone who had made terrible choices and was facing the consequences. Her story was separate from mine now. Donald Fletcher was released in January after serving his full 6-month sentence. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that he had moved to New Mexico to live with his daughter. He was reportedly very quiet and withdrawn, a broken man. Brenda Carlisle tried to run for city council in a small town outside Gilbert. When her criminal record became public during the campaign, she withdrew. Last I heard, she was working as a receptionist somewhere and keeping a very low profile. As for me, life continued its steady forward momentum. Rebecca and I got engaged in February. We started planning a wedding for the following summer, something small and intimate with just close friends and family. We also started seriously house hunting, looking at properties outside any HOA jurisdiction. We wanted land, space, freedom to do what we wanted without anyone's approval. In March, the HOA Advisory Committee presented its final recommendations to the state legislature. Many of our proposals were incorporated into new bills that would be voted on in the next session. It looked like even stronger protections for homeowners were on the way. I attended a legislative hearing in April where the bills were being debated. I was listed as a witness, there to provide testimony about my experience. I told the committee of legislators everything that had happened, from waking up to find my driveway blocked, to watching Barbara and her cronies get arrested, to the long legal battles that followed. The current system gives HOA boards too much power with too little oversight, I concluded. Regular homeowners should not need to hire lawyers and go through months of legal battles just to protect their basic rights. These reforms will help balance the scales and ensure that what happened to me does not happen to others. The bills passed with strong bipartisan support. Arizona now had some of the strongest HOA protections in the country, all because one petty tyrant had pushed too far and targeted someone who refused to back down. By June, Rebecca and I had found our dream property, 5 acres outside Gilbert, no HOA, no neighbors close enough to complain about anything. We closed on it in July and immediately started planning our new house. We would build something custom, something that reflected us, with no board approval needed for paint colors or landscaping or anything else. The wedding happened in August at a small venue in Sedona, surrounded by red rocks and blue sky. It was perfect. Tom Brennan was there, along with Mrs. Chen and several other neighbors from Riverside Meadows. Even Jennifer Morrison came, bringing her husband. We danced and ate and celebrated, and for one day, nothing else mattered except being happy. Rebecca and I honeymooned in Italy for 2 weeks, eating too much pasta and drinking too much wine and not thinking about HOAs or legal battles or any of the drama that had dominated so much of my life over the past 2 years. When we got back, we started the process of building our new house and preparing to move out of Riverside Meadows. I felt a strange mix of emotions about leaving. The community had been a battlefield, but it had also been where I learned to stand up for myself, where I discovered I was stronger than I thought. In September, we had a going-away party at our house in Riverside Meadows. The new HOA board presented me with a plaque that read, "To Marcus Montgomery, for standing up, speaking out, and making our community better. Thank you." I hung that plaque in my office in our new house, right next to my diplomas and certifications. It was a reminder of what I had been through, what I had accomplished, and why it mattered. Our new house was completed in December, just in time for the holidays. It was beautiful, modern but warm, with big windows that looked out over our 5 acres of desert landscape. We had complete freedom to do whatever we wanted. Want to plant cacti? Go ahead. Want to paint the front door bright blue? Nobody could stop us. Want to leave the garage door open all day? Not a problem. That Christmas, sitting in our new living room with Rebecca, I reflected on everything that had happened since that Tuesday morning when I woke up to find my driveway blocked. It had been a long, difficult journey, but I had come out the other side stronger, wiser, and with a deeper appreciation for the rights and freedoms that I used to take for granted. Barbara Patterson and her board had tried to break me, to force me into submission through intimidation and illegal acts. Instead, they had awakened something in me, a refusal to be pushed around, a commitment to justice and accountability. They were in prison now, their reputations destroyed, their power gone. And I was here, in my own home on my own land, free to live my life as I chose. That was the real victory. Not the money or the legal judgments or even the law changes, though all of those mattered. The real victory was reclaiming my freedom and showing others that they could do the same. Sometimes the system works. Sometimes justice prevails. Sometimes the little guy wins against the petty tyrants who abuse their power. This was one of those times. And standing in my new home, looking out at the Arizona sunset painting the desert in shades of orange and gold, I knew that every minute of the fight had been worth it.